Well, today on Nation, a window cleaners podcast, we are talking to the $5 million man himself. And I'm telling you, if you're a window cleaner and you just don't know what you're doing, or you want to be better, or you want to talk to somebody who's been there, done that, and is amazing, make sure to stay tuned to WCR Nation. What's up, everybody? Jersey here from windowcleaner.com, and you are here. What is up? If it's your first time here, have a look around. Hundreds of episodes. We've been doing this now 7.5 years, every single week, 400 plus weeks in a row. Go back, listen. Not every episode sucks, but hopefully you get something out of it. If it's not your first time here, thanks for coming back. So, yeah. Anyway, so just to jump right in it, I want to tell people about you. We've known each other for a long time, and I have a funny story I'm going to tell you about the minute I met you. But tell us who you are, what do you do? Give us a little rundown.
Of course, my name's Wesley Bloome. I'm the owner of Wise Guys Pro Wash. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, excited to be here. Really appreciate you having me on. I can think back to years ago when I was out cleaning and I was, listening to the WCR Nation podcast and, listening to guests that you had on and so it's cool to come full circle, see behind the scenes a little bit
Yeah.
of one of the top podcasts on iTunes.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got to be there, right? Yeah. My funny story for you. So, if anybody doesn't know, you've been in the industry for a long time. Your pressure washing would you say pressure washing is still your main gig? You kind of do window cleaning,
Yeah,
add on, you
absolutely.
do it all.
Yeah.
Every time I ever talk to anybody about branding, and if you guys that are listening or watching have heard me talk about the guy I know who brands everything, this is actually him. So I've talked about you a lot in without mentioning your name. But the first time we met was it Las Vegas? Yes, Las Vegas. And it was at one of the shows, and you were just like little old you, just like quiet, didn't know anybody. You're like, hey. And I was like, dude, let's hang out. Like, come with us. We're like in a big group and we'll walk. You guys hung out the whole time. And the next year, I thought you were just some dude getting into window cleaning. We didn't really talk shop. Like, we just were talking. And the next year you were like, oh yeah, like I hit my goal, I really wanted to. I was I was going to be $1 million company before I hit 21. And I was like, huh? They're like, yeah, I hit the goal, like blah blah. And I was like, in my head, I was like, no, 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 no. You were the dude who like had never cleaned windows, and it wasn't that at all. And anyway, you're very humble and kind of the awesomeness that you've done. But that was the first time, and the first two times that I just was like, oh, I completely didn't realize who you were or what you were doing. So, congrats on that either way.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean it's definitely it's one of the perks of, looking a lot longer looking younger than you are, it's every time I get frustrated about it now, because I'm 30 now and back when we
13.
first
I think you
met,
meant 13. 13.
yeah, it's like back when like Vegas, I distinctly remember that trip and and I was over 21 at the time, and just over 21, and so there was two different instances at the casino where security approached me to tell me that, sir, you have to be over 21 to be in the casino.
Yeah.
And I'm
I'm
like,
just glad
I'm
that
staying here.
when we were walking around, nobody asked if I was your dad. So that's all I was happy about. So yeah.
Well, they would see, the listeners, you don't realize how big of a human being Jersey is. You just know the voice. But I'm telling you, like, people probably thought it was my bodyguard walking around,
Right. I
compared
should have
to
been.
my, my 5'9", 160-pound self. And then there's Jersey, and you're what, six, what?
Yeah,
What are
about
you these
six
days?
two ish. Six,
Six
yeah.
two, a little what, 250 of just solid muscle.
220. Yeah, it depends on when that was, but could have been, yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
round it
that's
up.
one funny thing too is people either they listen to me or they watch me, and then when I meet them in the real life, they're like, "I didn't know you were tall." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." You stare at my face, and my camera always kind of shoots down at me, so
Yeah.
apparently I look small, but yeah. But what was your initial goal like anyway? Like what I mean, I know you kind of told me, but why did you think that? What got you to want that as your goal?
I think for me, really, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have some master plan, that I was going to build, this big company or anything like that. For me, it was more a matter of I started off, I wanted to make some money over the summer. before my sophomore year of college. So I went to a small college, Maryville College is the name of it. It's in Tennessee. It's about 15 minutes south of Knoxville. And so went there to play football and was just trying to figure out a way to make some money over the summer because you can't really work and play football. It's kind of
Yeah.
tough, especially in football season. D3 is very different than D1, but it's still nonetheless kind of hard to do. And so, thought about pressure washing as a way to do it. I had never done it. I started with a friend of mine. He had never done it. And so I thought it was a great idea to just do it. And so kind of figured it out from there, watching different YouTube videos and borrowing equipment from like his aunt, a little $300 roll around machine.
Yeah, yeah.
First job, it was like couldn't turn the machine on. Had to call his dad. His dad's like, "Did you choke it?" I'm like, where am I supposed to choke at?"
Yeah, yeah.
Like this doesn't make, I was so unmechanically inclined, I was 19 and then it was like I didn't know what the pressure tip was. I'll never forget there was one day where I lost an O-ring and I left the job, drove all the way to Home Depot, bought another quick connect, and then I was like, well, I don't have any tools, so I stopped at a tire shop, like a discount tire, and I walked in there and I said, "Hey, like, can one of y'all please replace this fitting on my hose? Like, I'll give you $10." And somebody did it.
Yeah.
And it was like all I had to do was put a 2 cent O-ring in there and I would have been fine. I wouldn't have had to drive all the way to Home Depot. So
Right.
so yes, just that's kind of how it started. And I thought that I wanted to make some money. That was the goal, right? So my goal was $3,000. That summer I want to make $3,000. Well, I made $3,000 in the first 2 weeks. And that's when I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And
Yeah.
so then fast forward, I finished the summer, did 18,000 and then that's when I decided to stop. I went back, played my sophomore year of football, and then that's when I was like, you know what? Like I really want to see what I can do here. I think I can pay for my college because, there's no athletic scholarships in D3, so it was
Yeah.
so I stopped playing football and then that's when I got a little bit more serious. And then that's when I started going to events and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Did you start with the same logo you have now? Was that your first logo?
No, the first name of the company was College Student Pressure Washing. And so the logo was basically a guy pressure washing a ball and chain that says student debt, like pressure
Nice.
washing it off.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was the initial logo, and I actually had somebody on the floor below me in my dorm, an art major. I was like, "Hey, I got this idea. Can you like draw this?" And so she drew it, and that's literally what I had on my shirts was like a drawing.
Yeah.
And then, a year later, I had it digitalized, and then yeah, and then it wasn't until 20 like the end of 2017 because I graduated college in 2017. So like 24 the summer of 2014 was the first year I did it. So the summer of 2014, 15, 16, those were all in college.
Hmm.
And so then I graduated in 2017. And so the summer of 2017 was the first, kind of like full time actually doing it. And so, that's when Ryan Kettering with Prolific Brand, Design, basically. I called him up because I'd met him at some of the events. I think he was at the Vegas event too, and it was like I asked him like, "Hey, can I hire you to make my logo better? Like it's a clip art image. Can you like make it better?"
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he goes, "I could, but I don't think it's a good idea." I'm like, what do you mean?" And then that's when he told me that, it's not really a brand, college student pressure washing. If somebody asks you, who does your pressure washing, college students,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like it's not. And so that's when I then rebranded to Wise Guys and all that stuff back then before right at the beginning of 2028 or 2020 2018.
Yeah, that the old logo, I haven't seen it, but it sounds actually like it's pretty good. So you hit it out of the park right away. But it's like college hunks hauling junk if you have those. Like,
Yeah,
what if
that was the
a
idea. Yeah.
40-year-old dude shows up or a 40-year-old chick? Like you're like, what college? Like you kind of you're
Yeah.
painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was kind of, at least for them, the college hunks, at least that's brandable, college student isn't.
Doesn't roll off the
So
tongue.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't. So, but yeah, that was one of the companies that I looked at for inspiration early on for sure.
Man, so if no people listening aren't going to know this, but you brand everything. So with that logo, again, I love the logo. I love the color scheme. Just the whole thing looks like you paid $100,000 to have a brand made. I mean, it's really, really on point. But one of the things that I think you do awesome, just to like tell people in general, is you brand everything. Literally brand everything. I mean, you got decals on equipment, you got it on
Yeah.
buckets, you got it on trucks, you got
Yeah, we got it
wraps.
on the
Everything's the
bottles.
same.
Yeah,
Exactly.
got it on the yeah, everywhere.
It's something when you look at these people who have like a magnet sign. And by the way, if you're listening and you have a magnet sign, you can text me, cuss me out. I'm not talking directly to you, but every time I see a magnet sign, it's like you're a temporary business. You wanted a magnet so you could take it off because you're not going to be a window cleaner later. Like when you get to that point where you brand everything, it's expensive. Vehicle wraps are expensive, logos are expensive, the shirt is expensive. Like it's expensive, but it just sends a different message altogether. I mean, I really do think that people looking at your company are seeing the message before they even hear you open your mouth. You're legit, you're professional, you're going to do awesome stuff. Look at this company, it's a real company. If I show up with like a white, t-shirt that's all dirty on it, I'm like, "Hey, I showed up in my Corolla or something." It doesn't give the same message.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I think it's scary, when you're starting out, and I think that, to make a level of financial commitment, to have a solid brand, I think that I don't remember exactly how much it was at the time, but it was a five-figure investment then, and I remember it was kind of scary to think about, I'm going to put all this money into this logo. But again, it's really hard to quantify it, and it's like how much has it paid for itself and over the years. And so yeah, I know that there's some people that, they think that um wraps cost a lot of money. They try to like,
Yeah.
partial wraps and this and that. But I think, when you look at your even way bigger companies, your Tommy Mello's, your, A1 Garages and so forth, like you look at they actually just came to Atlanta, like they have a location here now. And so yesterday I was driving home and I saw one of their vans and it's like
Big old Tommy
every
Mello's
part of
head on the side of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like every part of it. They are even wrapping the conduit carrier, which is nothing but a PVC pipe.
Yeah.
And I remember asking them about it. I'm like, man, like, do you really like it's white? It's not like it looks bad. Like, why are y'all wrapping that? Like that adds,
Yeah.
fortunately for them, they're at a size where they wrap it themselves. Yes, they literally have their own wrap shop
Oh
that they
wow.
take all the vans to. But yeah, I think it's important. It's a level of commitment. I think ultimately, I think sometimes I started out with magnets too, in the very beginning.
I think most do.
And but I think it's a matter of, taking that next step of like truly being committed to, burning the boats. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you're either, and that's really what I did early on was I didn't have much of an option. I got my first office in 2018 without a single full-time employee. I'd never had a full-time employee before. I'd never hired anybody that I didn't know. And I got a 1,500 square foot office and and it was kind of like I bought $3,000 worth of uniforms. Right, looking back on it, like what a stupid decision. But I
Yeah.
bought like extra small, small, medium, large, all the way up to like 4XL. I don't know why I was thinking that somebody that big is going to be out there spraying water, but
Right.
that's what I did. And so I think it's kind of the mindset of well, for me it was very much so a matter of if I'm going to go bankrupt, I'd rather go bankrupt at 22
Yeah.
than go
That's the
bankrupt
time.
at 30. And so, it was very much so a field of dreams, build it and they'll come. It's not financial advice for those listening. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend, like I personally guaranteed $100,000 worth of a lease for an office space when, I had not done that much revenue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I wouldn't recommend it, but I think at the same time, all of us have that place where all of us have a different position of like our backs being against the wall and feeling we have no other choice but to
Yeah.
succeed. And so I think as long as everybody is finding where that point is for them and getting a little bit uncomfortable, it's going to help force your business to grow.
Yeah. I think jumping into the deep end like that too. Yeah, you only do that when you know you can swim, or at least you have
Yeah.
confidence that you can swim. It's the same thing when you jump into buying like an office, you have the confidence in you being like, yeah, I could make this work. Like 90% of businesses don't fail because the market's not there. It's because 90% of
Yeah,
business owners suck. Like, I mean,
100%.
it is really, really comes down to that. And a lot of times, especially with like the wraps, people are like, ah, it's $3,000 for a wrap. It's like, okay, that's a week worth of advertising. Like you'll get that back, but
Yeah.
you before it happens, you go, oh, I don't know if I'll get anything. It's like, well, yes, you do. You know you're gonna get it because you're gonna get it or you're gonna die. That's up to you, right? You have to have the confidence in yourself more than anything.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've got wraps that are they're around $3,000 back then. It was like we just got rid of our last truck that we had. Actually, sorry, we have a truck still running right now with the original wrap that we put on in
Wow.
2018, and it looks fine. We haven't done anything to it.
How
So
many
it's like
people do you
how
think have
many?
seen that over the years? Just a couple,
Yeah,
probably brought you
exactly.
in a few
Yeah.
bucks.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it too, is, I think that there's certain decisions that you can make. I think you got to do it within reason. I see the guys walking around with softball jerseys on. Nothing wrong with it, right? Like, I like playing softball myself,
Yeah, yeah,
but you're not going to catch me wearing one of those jerseys because I'm not truly a believer that me paying $50 for a shirt is really that much going to bring that much difference in terms of paying, $15 for a shirt.
yeah,
If the branding's on the front and the back, like I don't, so that's one of those places where, I differ on some people.
yeah,
And I think really it's very different when you're by yourself. It's one thing to, spend $50 on a couple shirts, but I mean, you know, we're gonna have about 50 people this year. So it's kind of like you do the math on that.
yeah,
You do 50 people, let's say you get everybody five shirts. You know, that's 250 times 50. Yeah, that's 12 and a half grand's worth of
yeah.
shirts.
Shirts.
And not everybody's going to turn them in when they leave. So it's just, so again, I think I think you can go too far. And I think that so my best advice to people who want a branding, like this is just a sticker,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's a Hydro Flask bottle, but it's just a sticker. So you can brand things without, going
Crazy.
um crazy. Yeah, you don't have like this polo right here. I figured out how to purchase uniforms at wholesale and then do the embroidery also at wholesale. And
Nice.
so like this polo, for example, embroidered, I think it cost me $6.50.
Wow. Wow.
So like you can do it without, overspending. I think that's the
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. And by the way, you said you got like triple XL. You're a pressure washer, like you started pressure washing, so that's totally feasible that you got a triple XL
Yeah,
dude pressure washing. Not window
it is.
cleaning, but pressure washing. You'll see it. You'll
It
see
is.
it.
It
Well, what do
is
you think makes you
100%.
different? Like, I know your branding's on point. I know your brain works a different way. You've had the confidence, but like, what makes you different as a company? What do you think sets you apart?
I think really what it comes down to is I think in any business, a lot of it comes down to the leader, the owner of the company. I
Yeah.
think, you mentioned it earlier on. I think that it all starts there. I think that you can never, your company is not going to outgrow you and your ability to lead. And so the leader that I am right now, it's not a finished product. It's always a matter of constantly improving, constantly getting better and so forth. And so, but what I did was back when I was starting out, and it was just me, I knew that I had to level up. And you think about how's a 19-year-old who doesn't even know how to do the thing, like you have to figure out how to do the thing, but you
Yeah.
also need to learn how to manage people and how to do the sales and do all that stuff. And so I think that, one of the things I did early on that really set me apart was I was never afraid of investing in myself.
Yeah.
So, going to that event that, like that was, I don't think we met at the huge convention in Washington, D.C. the second year it was in D.C. or
Yeah.
Maryland. It wasn't D.C., whatever it was, in Maryland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wasn't at the first one, but I went to the second year that it was there in a row. And it was terrifying, man. I was a senior in college. So this was in August of my senior year of college. And, back in 2016. And, it was the first time I ever flew on an airplane by myself. I'd
Dang.
flown on airplanes before, but I'd never done it on my own.
Yeah.
I'd never even been in an Uber before. This was back when Uber was still kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's like nobody thinks twice about it.
Right.
But, this was almost 10 years ago. And so I'll never forget, like, I couldn't afford to stay at the Gaylord, where the hotel was, like the
Yeah.
event was at. So I stayed at the Comfort Inn. It was like 2 miles away.
Yeah.
And the first day I walked to the event
Nice,
because
nice.
it was like, and it was so hot that, like I got there, I was soaking wet and sweat. And it was like, okay, maybe I want to try this Uber thing out.
Yeah.
And so, going to that event, I didn't know anybody, like nobody. And so, it was scary. I mean, again, it was. And so, and it cost a lot of money, the ticket to go to it, the hotel, the flight. And so, but that was one of the best decisions I've ever made from a company standpoint
Yeah.
because I was able to meet like a good, like, um, Dave Carroll has been on your show before,
Yeah.
right? And so like I met him at that show for the first time.
Yeah.
I actually met Chris, Lamborghinis, for the first time. And so not that he would ever remember me because like I was nobody.
He
And
does.
so it was so yeah, so I think that was it is not being afraid to invest in yourself,
Yeah.
whether it's in books. Back then I was listening to about 50 books a year while I was out spraying water.
Wow.
And so, driving to the job or doing the job, I was listening to books, I was listening to podcasts, just trying to learn. I think that's what a lot of people early on, that's like the best time to do it. You're
Yeah.
getting paid to clean, you're getting exercise. It's beautiful outside a lot of the time. Why not double dip and also learn then too?
Right.
Yeah, so I think investing in myself early on, I went to basically every big event in the industry for the first like 6 years.
Wow.
The huge conventions and all that stuff. I think we met at like an ice show,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe, which was later on the same year, of first time I'd ever been to Vegas, same kind of premise there. So I think
Yeah.
investing in, not being afraid to invest in myself. And then I think also the delaying gratification component. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part. I think that a lot of guys or girls, you start to get some success and you start to kind of soften up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then
You
that's
don't
when
get
things
hungry. You
fall
don't
apart.
stay hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the college sports versus pro sports too. The college is always, they're always trying so much harder. The pro people
Yeah.
are like, yeah, it's in my contract. You can't do anything, They just don't care as much.
Yeah.
But college,
Yeah.
I mean, with your books, I think this is our college. Like right now, people buy magazines, they have listen to podcasts, soak up everything. They're watching YouTube videos. You went to school, you went to college, and you
Yeah.
spent 8 hours a day, not every day, I know, but you went
Yeah.
spent 8 hours a day to learn about a thing that you wanted to do. And then when somebody starts a business, they're like, "Oh, I don't have time to read a book." It's like, "But you do." Like, you spent 8 hours to learn how to be a political scientist or whatever. Well, do 8 hours a day of learning now and figure out that this is what you're going to do. This is college for what we're doing now.
100%. I wouldn't go to college now. I
Yeah.
didn't even want to graduate. The only reason why I did was because I felt like I had to, because the name of
Yeah.
the business was college student pressure washing. I felt like it would have been kind of disrespectful to like, hey, I know all
Right.
y'all just hired me. Because like, let's be honest, the quality wasn't there in the beginning.
Right,
Like it
right,
wasn't.
right.
Like, so, for these people to hire me, it was really they were hiring me.
Yeah.
And so I felt kind of this sense of like I had to finish. But like my last year of college, for example, I actually was so like Chris, for example, Lamborghinis had his book at that time that had come out,
Yeah. Marketing
what was it?
blueprint.
The Cleaning Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so, I had bought that. And so as a part of that, there were some courses and there were some documents that came with it and so forth. And that was like the greatest thing ever. There I was in my ethics class and I just had my computer up and I'm like going through and reading it and like going through the resources. And so, it was kind of like for me, there was a certain point where I knew I was going to graduate, but I wasn't going to let that keep me, hold me back from like
Yeah.
learning about the business. And so, yeah, no, you don't have a choice. I think that if you really want to be successful, you have to learn. You can either learn from your mistakes or other people's, and
Right.
so I think for me, it's a matter of I'd rather learn from those that have come ahead and not even just their mistakes, but also their successes. You don't
Yeah.
have to like we're not doing anything different. We're not really any special over anybody else. I think that all it is a matter of, I've intentionally sought out people that have done things well, even in different industries, and then tried to incorporate those things into here. And then you combine that with, the mindset of like you can always get better, you can always improve.
Yeah.
And you combine those together, and fortunately, things have gone well so far.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you, in all of the years you've been doing this, I know you said that going to shows was one of the best things, but what's like the best thing that you could like look back and go, this was the best thing I did for my company. Maybe not even at the time, but just in general.
I
Was
mean,
there
I
a
think
turning point? Was there a thing that sticks in your head?
I really think that that first convention was like the biggest of the turning points.
Yeah.
Because that's when, you walk into the room. I looked around, right? I met all these other business owners. And that's when you have this moment of like, man, like if these guys can do it,
Yeah.
I can do it.
It's real all
And
of a sudden. It's
yeah,
not
and it's
like
like,
your thing. It's like, oh, I'm just in an industry. Like until you see that, it's just you out there on your own island, kind of floating around.
yeah. And so I think that that was really a turning point of I can do this.
Hmm.
Like, not everybody, a lot of the business, like, for example, think about how many business owners are not listening to this podcast right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
right? They're not like I don't think that if you were to take a poll of everybody listening right now, would you truly rather listen to this or would you rather listen to music
Yeah.
or, watch Netflix or whatever? Like the reality is, and I read a book not too long ago, and one of the premises of the book is that poor people entertain and rich people educate.
Yeah.
And so I think that it goes a long way. And so for everybody that's listening to this, like, that's what it's all about,
Yeah.
is continuously trying to improve, and grow upon it. So again, not just the event. I think there was another, big turning point for me earlier on. So coaching has been a big part of what has helped me. And so, and I really tried to figure out the industry that I was getting into in terms of like as a whole. There was back then, there was E Clean magazine was one of the big magazines. And
Yeah.
so, I read like the previous 2 years worth of editions. And
Wow.
so that's how I became familiar with Chris, Josh Latimer. And so, I kind of saw it as like, wow, like, Chris really, and obviously Chris is who started WCR, and so, it's like Chris really kind of started something that didn't exist, and then Josh Latimer came in and, made it even better. And then, you had the other, then you had your Brandon Vaughns that came in after that, and made it even better. And so I think like one of the things, like when I went to that event, I met Josh for the first time and I didn't think much about him. And I told him this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like I saw this guy, this greaseball got up there in a suit, on the stage. And, afterwards somebody made me shake his hand and it was like, I remember his like the sweatiest hand ever. And I'm like, oh man, like this is, and
Right.
so, but I ended up that same friend who I met at the event, who the night before at the like the reception, like I barely even drink, but I like forced myself to go to this thing, super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at that I met somebody, and then that somebody introduced me to Josh at the next day after this keynote. And then that same friend, his name's Manny Galvin. He uh he was like, "Hey man, like you should buy his course." And it was $600. And I'm like, "Oh man, like I can't afford that. Like
Yeah.
600 bucks, like that's a lot." And so and here I am now, now I've got, consultants that I'm spending, $2,000 an hour to talk to them. And
Yeah.
so I think so yeah, there was a lot of those. Like I've got so many little turning points. One of the big another big one is that there was a lunch lady in my college, and so we ate in the dining hall all the time. That you had to. We had a meal plan, small college.
Yeah.
And so there was this lunch lady, and she was always on the sandwich station. That was her thing, and
Yeah.
like you felt kind of bad, shorter, kind of like, heavier set, always super nice, but like she looked like a lunch lady,
Right. Right.
right? Like it was clear.
It was a
And
career. Yeah.
so I'd go in there with my college student pressure washing uniform on, and she would say that, oh, like you should come give me an estimate. You should like, I need to get my house washed. Like, like, can you
Yeah.
give me an estimate? And I'd always think to myself, I'd play it off, like, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can you put some mayo on there? Yeah, absolutely. Can you
Yeah,
put some?
yeah.
And so finally, I'm like, all right, like this woman's mentioned it every day for the last like multiple weeks. Like, let me just give her an estimate, right?
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, I'll just do it for free. Like I'll
Right,
just,
right.
discount it. It's going to be a trailer. It's going to take me like 15 minutes to wash this thing.
Yeah.
And so she, gives me the address and I tell her, all right, I'm going to come out there and give you an estimate. So I put it in. I'm not from the area of where my college is. I put the address in. It's some weird like Indian name. Turns out she lives in one of the largest neighborhoods in the country. It's this like neighborhood. It's called Tellico Village. It is there's like 3,000 homes or so, and it's around this lake. And it's like the ultimate retire community. Like
Yeah.
everybody's like 50 and up. And so I go out there and I'm like driving around and I'm like, none of these are trailers. Like these are all like nice houses on
Yeah.
the lake. So sure enough, she's in like one of the smaller homes in the neighborhood, but still not like not a trailer.
Yeah.
And so, I give her the estimate. She agrees, and she goes, "Hey, one more thing, Wesley. She was the lady in the neighborhood that made granola and like sold granola to people. Yeah, she
Okay.
was the granola lady. So everybody knew who she was."
Yeah.
And so she's like, I'll tell, give some business cards, like I'll like give them to people. And again, like everybody says that they're not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure enough, that was a huge turning point. That first semester, this was spring semester of my junior year. That's when I did $11,500 in the span of like 2 months. And then the next year, I did $25,000 in the same 2 month window while still playing tennis and going to college,
Yeah.
all in that neighborhood
Wow.
because of the fact that, and so again, it just goes to show that, there's opportunity all around us.
Yeah.
And so it was the ultimate learning experience for me of, treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
Like,
Everyone's a customer or potential.
yeah. And
Yeah.
if they're not, they know somebody who
Yeah.
is.
Nice. Well, I got to get one bad thing. So, like this time that you've been in business, what's
Yeah.
the worst thing that's happened to you that you're like look back and be like, ah, that was like I took a jump, it didn't pay off. I lost money, I lost something. What's been so far up to this point, the worst thing that comes to mind?
I've had a lot of bad things, but I'll
Right.
tell you the first bad thing because this was around the similar time period. I think that everything early on, look, like there's been plenty of times that I've gotten served, and it's
Yeah.
like that's always kind of, like nobody really wants to get sued, and so like that's always but I think that really what it was, there's two instances in a short period of time. First was the the first day that I got off the truck, right? That was like the big thing, right? You got to get off the truck.
Yeah.
Like you got to be able to do other stuff. So I'm working to get off the truck. So this is in the summer of 2017, right after I graduated. This was like back in the day where I would drive the trailer and have my two, employees who I knew, and I would, we'd park, I'd disconnect the trailer, I'd get them set up, I'd talk to the customer. All right, guys, you got it, good. Then I would drive the truck, go give estimates, and then I'd come back and get them and drive to their next job,
Oh
right?
wow.
That's how it was for the first couple, for a little bit. And so finally, I was like, all right, like he knows how to drive the trailer. He knows how to talk to customers. I don't have to be there. Like they can do this.
Yeah.
So they go, they do the jobs. I'm terrified, obviously.
Yeah.
I call them on their way back. They had just dropped off the trailer at the storage unit. And so they're driving back, and we were all living together at the time. And by living together, like we were in my mom's basement. One of them was sleeping in the same bed as me. The
Nice.
other guy was sleeping in the living room of the basement. Like it was kind of like, it was not a glamorous
Yeah.
operation by any
Yeah,
means.
yeah.
And so they're on the way back between the storage unit and my mom's townhome was like half a mile, maybe a mile. And so we're talking, and it's like they're talking, oh yeah, everything went well, like this customer was happy, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, like this is it.
Yeah.
I'm off the truck, like that's it. And so all of a sudden, I hear some noise. I hear what sounds like glass breaking, and I hear a woman's voice saying, "Are you okay?" And my phone dies.
Oh,
Like right then. This was back like, the iPhone days where like your phone would die and it would take like, a minute to like
yeah,
re-power
yeah.
up enough to turn on. And so like longest minute of my life, I call him back and he goes, "Hey Wes, the Tacoma," he's from Venezuela. He goes, "The Tacoma totaled." I said, "What?" He said, "The Tacoma totaled." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Come outside." So I go, and I'm like looking out the window and I see like fire truck with the lights on, police car with the lights on. And so I walk up the hill and there's the Tacoma upside down, perpendicular to the road.
Oh,
And so that was it was total. He was right.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
total. And so it was kind of like, that could have been it. That could
yeah,
have been one of those turning points of like, all right, I can't pull the trailer. I don't have a vehicle. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like my surface cleaners are broken. My ladder's broken. Like, what am I supposed to do? And what makes it even hurt more was I like, kid you not, the day before I sold a $20,000 job.
wow,
And before that, the biggest job I'd ever done was like 600. So I had this huge high, right? Like, oh
yeah,
yeah, like we're gonna clean this townhome community, yeah.
yeah,
And then the next day the truck's totaled. And
uh,
so yeah, so that was a low low. That was very, difficult there. And then fortunately I was able to navigate it and stuff and whatnot, but then and we got the job done and they were happy and so forth. Um and I ended up buying another Tacoma like later on and so forth. But the other turning point was that the first time that I got sued, which coincidentally was like 6 months later,
of
and
course, when
that's
it
when
rains, it
they,
pours. Yeah.
yeah, and that's when we surface cleaned a guy's driveway, and we cleaned multiple driveways on the same day, same surface cleaner, same machine, and of course this one guy's driveway got etched, but it wasn't the whole driveway; it was just a section of the driveway, the same section that had already been re-poured by the concrete company because it had failed the first time they had
Mm.
installed it. So it was kind of like this doesn't add
Whee!
up.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so that was a $10,000 thing. A $200 driveway cost me $10,000. And so those were two, and that's when I realized, you know what? Like this is um this is it. Like this is like this is the real deal now. Like we're
yeah.
playing,
I feel like a
the
real business now that I got
yeah.
shafted. Yeah,
It's like the revenue numbers aren't there. I'm still working an unbelievable amount, but it's like, okay, well, I mean, business doesn't discriminate.
yeah,
It doesn't care that, oh, you're just this young college guy, like we're not going to give you any adversity, we're going to make it easy for you. It's like these people don't care.
yeah,
Fortunately, it wasn't our fault on the total vehicle at all. Somebody drifted across the lane and hit us, hit, them. And so yeah, man, I think what I like to think of it is that it's all about not getting too high and not getting too low.
right.
It's really easy to have the big wins, and then we're all going to have lots of losses. And it
Yeah,
becomes this emotional roller coaster. And I think as the business owner, your team is looking at you. It's kind of like when your kid, I don't have a kid, so I'm assuming this has happened to you with your kids,
yeah, yeah,
is, you're at the playground, the kid takes a spill, and what's the first thing they do? They look at the parents, right? And if the parent is like, "Oh my gosh, sweetie, are you okay?" Then they start
yeah.
crying.
Right, right.
And if the parent laughs and it's like, "Okay, like you're good," no
Yeah,
tears. I
right.
think that, employees are very similar to that of anytime something happens, bad or really good, they're looking at the business owner of
Right.
how are they going to respond to this. And that's going to, I think for us as human beings, being emotional beings, it's hard to not act emotionally in some of these difficult situations.
Yeah. Well, it still comes through that way, you know. Business is business, and that makes sense. But it's again, 90% of businesses fail because of the business owner. Those are 90% of people who gave up. Like everybody has crappy things, and your business wouldn't be a business if when the totaled vehicle happened, you went, well, there's nothing we could do. All right, I'm going to the box factory. Like, if you
Yeah.
don't do something about it, then you don't do something about it. So, but I appreciate that, man. I really do appreciate you talking to me. People have seen you talking all over. Um, it's really kind of refreshing to have somebody who's got just a genuinely good. I know everybody asks you for advice, and they really sometimes could take advantage of you. I know, but it's really nice just to have you being able to like share everything. So I very, very much appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think that it's a roller coaster, for everybody. And for me too. Even last year, highest profitable year we've ever had, biggest year we've ever had, but it was, one of the more challenging years that I've had. And so I
Yeah,
think that, don't just look at it's easy to think like, oh, this company's doing, multiple millions of dollars, they've got it all figured out. They don't have these issues anymore.
yeah,
The thing that, you have to understand is that as you grow, you're creating new problems that weren't there before that now you have to solve. And so
yeah,
even problems that you had solved at a smaller scale, they become bigger problems as you grow. And that's where, having resources, to be able to reach out to. And you've been a huge resource to me, in terms of over the years, of not just at the events. I mean, you were answering all kinds of questions that I had, well before I even knew what window cleaning was,
yeah,
just like, just pressure washing questions. And then there was a period where I was like, you know what, let me learn a little bit more about window cleaning because maybe it makes sense to add it. And so, you took a ton of time to explain to me, what everything was DI, systems and, water fed poles and all that stuff. And I didn't even know that that's what you did, to be honest. I didn't know that
yeah,
that's like, this was back when you still, I think had your cleaning company at that point,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and so I think, and so, I really want to, thank you for that of, all these years, as you know this, but like every single piece of window cleaning equipment has come from with your help,
yeah,
through you. And I think that you know, the it's that's not just me saying that. Like, we obviously we just placed a pretty big order, together
yeah,
last month, gearing up for the season in terms of, with new poles and new brushes. And I know that I can always count on you to, tell me the truth, on some of these things of like, hey, Jersey, look, I see this piece of equipment, is it really better than what we have?
yeah,
And that's where you'll say, well, it is a really impressive piece of equipment, but for the situation that you're in with multiple crews and probably not worth it.
right,
It's probably not, you probably don't need you're probably not going to see the ROI on this piece of equipment that's so much more expensive when it's going into employees' hand. And so yeah, so that's to anybody that's a listener of the show and you haven't actually leaned on U Jersey as a resource, to you need to, in terms of I mean, half the time I feel bad, we're on the phone, we're talking, it's like we're an hour's gone by, and I'm like, oh man, Jersey's got other people that's probably trying to call him too.
that's all
I
right.
need to
Yeah,
stop hogging the line, spread the love
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah,
So yeah, so I'm really appreciative of that. Always willing to take the time, not just for me, but for others as well. And what I can say is that it hasn't changed back when I was buying my first pole from you, to now, it's like I think I bought a couple dozen poles from you,
yeah,
not
yeah,
too long ago. And so I think that like, but again, that those relationships, you have to start those relationships early on,
yeah,
and not just like when you need them,
right,
and there's obviously, there's lots of great people at WCR, that I've interacted with, obviously Alex and Chris, the owners, and
yeah,
John, I like John a lot too, but again, I appreciate, you always taking care of of me and especially when stuff's like, hey man, look, this pole broke, what do I do? Right? It's
Yeah.
like just send a couple pictures to me. I'm like, I see this, this form, it's kind of long, what's this to do? It's like, look, just send me the photos, I got you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the when you surround yourself with people, it has to be the right people. And sometimes we have all had people we thought were the right people at some time, and you're like, their message is different than what I'm trying to say, or they're trying to blow smoke out, and it just kind of ruins it. So you got to surround yourself with good people, but they have to be genuinely good people. So I agree completely
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I remember starting out, like I always thought that more um I used to have this preconceived notion, that simple is bad.
Yeah,
Like look at that truck, right? Like it's too simple, like it is not sophisticated enough. And so, whether like every part I was thinking that. So I would talk to successful guys, you know, um, who like I would even go visit their operation and I'm like, they're doing 3 million. I'm doing 500,000, and yet I think I know better than he does
yeah,
in terms of like, hey man, like, what do you mean you just set the gas jug on the flatbed? Like, you don't strap it down?
yeah,
No, we don't need to. Or like those kind of moments where you're like, and what's funny is that I'm telling you, man, every year we get bigger and bigger. I simplify more and more.
yeah,
And of like you don't need the big fancy this or that. It's like is it just going to get the job done? And I think that's what I appreciate about you is that like I'm basically like you know tell me what I need,
yeah,
in terms of and so for you to say you don't need that fancy stuff. This is going to get the job done. And so, with you, with other guys as well. And so again, for those that are listening that are similar to me, you want it to be as good as possible. Don't underestimate the simplicity and don't feel that that is a sign of incompetence.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't have 50 texts that they're running either. And you realize that the simpler you make it, the more likely it is to get done, the more likely it is to get done with less things breaking, the more, there is a point of overbuying just to overbuy. And sometimes, it just doesn't make sense. So I completely agree. Keep it simple, stupid is a genuine, especially when you're trying to get people to do something. It's really, really important. So. Well, cool, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying the kind words, by the way. I didn't pay you at all to say those, by the way,
No.
no matter what people think. But yeah, I very much appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the time. Thanks for talking to me always too. Thanks for just helping everybody in the industry. It's really amazing what you've done, but just, kind of being able to be an open book. Most people, in the big, you're almost intimidated. I've never been intimidated around you, so I really appreciate that. I don't know. But either way, I do very, very much appreciate it. And I hope you another $5 million next year. So I very much appreciate it.
Course, I mean, we'll see. I mean, the year is just beginning, and who knows? Maybe things won't work out how I want to. But either way, I think that um, we can all control, there's things that we can control, things that we can't control,
Yeah.
in terms of in business and in life. I think that, really all it is, focusing on what we can. Again, going back to the simplicity, like that's a very simplistic statement,
Yeah.
that somebody could say if they don't have something better to say. But, I truly believe that that's the case. And I think that, anybody that wants to, come up and talk to me at an event, happy to answer any questions that you have and so forth. Again, and for me, I got nothing to sell, right? Like, in terms of, this is where I would make my pitch, buy my book, buy my course, hit me up on this platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's my ebook. It's free. Just
Yeah.
put your
Yeah.
email in,
You have
right?
that
Like, I don't have
$600 course, right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. It's like, I don't have any of that. Anytime I'm speaking at an event or I'm on a podcast, like it's only because, typically it's to give back. and so that's what this is for me. It's kind of I'm telling you, man, like I've listened to hundreds of your episodes on your podcast, through the years, well before we started working together. And
Yeah.
so just to be able to have the opportunity to come on here and, hopefully somebody got some value out of this.
Yeah.
And it's going to help them, with their business and so forth. Like that's what it's all about. I know that's why you do this too. And
Yeah.
for those that don't even know me, Jersey, how long have you been podcasting? Because you've been doing this well before this show.
Yeah, so I this show is 7.5 years, and then I did a show before that, even. So I started doing the biz in like way back in the grainy YouTube days. So it's been a very, very long time.
But again, if it wasn't for guys like you that that are willing to take the time and invest in the next generation, I
Yeah,
think like I wouldn't be where I am. I know that everybody else that listens to the show, they wouldn't be in that position either. So again, I appreciate you having me on here,
yeah,
but at the same time, like it's an honor just as much as anything, just to be able to be on here. I remember we joke in the year, maybe one of these days I'll be able to. One of these
yeah,
days you'll let me make the cut. And
yeah.
so it's cool to finally be able to do it.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I very much appreciate it too. If you guys have any questions or any needs, you know my number. It's 862-312-2026. Shameless plug, of course. Give me a call. Let me put your orders in. Be as happy as Wesley. Maybe I will make you just as happy. But definitely let me know. Go do everything that you possibly can. Emulate somebody who's successful in what they've done and what they've said. Really take it to heart. But more importantly, for next week, go out there and be epic.